All right, so for our latest project, we're going to be taking a look at this very nice old realistic PA amplifier. This is model MPA-80, and this unit belongs to one of the engineers where I work. He pulled this off of a job site that they were getting rid of a bunch of stuff and brought it back to the office. And we did hook it up, couldn't get any sound out of it. I pulled the top cover off just to have a look, and even though there's a few red flags there, with limited resources decided it was best just to bring it back to my shop. So we're gonna see if we can figure out what is going on with this thing. I have no idea what his intended application for the amplifier is. It's basically a 5 source mixer amp with 1 channel output. And I believe it'll drive maybe a 4-ohm load. So I guess depending on what you're gonna do with it will depend on what the best application for it would be. As always, we'll come in, we'll have a look at the controls and features of the unit, as well as the connections they provided in the back. As for our intro music this time, we're going to go back to 1984, checking out the Perfect Strangers album by Deep Purple. And in a lot of circles back in those days, this would have been considered a comeback album for the band, and it certainly was very successful with a tour that followed. So let's go ahead and check out one of my favorite tracks from this, called Knocking at Your Back Door. And then we'll get started on the realistic. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. We'll take a quick tour of the controls and features of the unit. Starting on the far left here, they're going to give you the 5 source selection gain controls. And these are nice, very fluid, damped sliders. They all feel pretty good. I'll be surprised if we don't have some static in at least one, but probably all of them. To the right of that, and these are listed mic 1, mic 2. 3 and 4 can be either a microphone or a turntable input. And then the 5th one is just a line level auxiliary input. There's a power meter here. The peak is 100 watts, but I believe the amplifier is 80 watts based on the model number of it. Source monitor right below that, where you can pick whatever you want to hear through your headphones or a combination of all of them, say in mix here at the very last setting. There's a clipping light up here to let you know you've gone a little too far, and then a nice weighted damped volume control. There's a little memory ring behind that, so you can set it so you don't exceed what you need for the output. There's a reset LED at the top here. Not sure if this is just to alert you that the load's too low, or maybe you're in some kind of a thermal situation, in which case you need to basically just turn the amp off and wait till it cools down and maybe recheck your load. Locking power switch, of course, and then below that, is your 1/4-inch headphones jack for your monitoring. Let's flip it around. We'll take a look at the connections in the back. And on the left here, they're going to give you that classic screw-in fuse holder using an AGC type fuse for this. Spring-loaded bare wire speaker connections, or there's 2 1/4-inch output jacks here for your speakers. Since it's only a 1-channel amplifier, I'm not sure if these are wired in series. I would imagine they are. And we'll be able to confirm that once we get it opened up. You got some RCA options here as well. You got in and out with a switch that says EQ and bypass. So I assume you can put an equalizer in between the main and the pre. And when he brought that back to the office, we did have this jumper in place there. Looks like it's okay, but there probably was a cover over the whole thing that got broken off at one point. And now that seems to be gone. But we did try this even with an RCA jumper between these and still couldn't get any sound out of it. Got a mix bus and an auxiliary here for your input, as well as the 2 turntable inputs. And then there's switches for each one, determining whether you're going to use a mic or a turntable. And then the 4 mic jacks or XLR as well as 1/4-inch. So giving you a little bit of versatility there. So I've already pretty much, as I said, we tested it, couldn't get any sound out of it, but let's go ahead and take the top off of it. We'll hook it up one more time here and just confirm there was something weird going on when we tested it that day, and we'll see what we can get going. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up, and I'll show you what I discovered about this. But before I do that, let's take a look at the inside of it. And when we opened this up, back at my work, the first thing I noticed about this was the outputs they use in this 1-channel amplifier. NEC 2SB 705 and a 2SD 745. These outputs are very hard to come by. They're not available anymore, discontinued. And if you need a pair of them, they're hard to find. And so the next time I need a pair, I'm going to be seeking out one of these amplifiers to try to harvest them out of this. But as far as the amp goes, a couple of red flags I noticed along with those outputs that caught my eye. We got some caps here with the jacket slid down on. Doesn't surprise me that much. It doesn't even really concern me terribly. But there's a blob of glue here that I thought I had seen maybe some corrosion around this resistor right here. It's hard to get in there to show you what I'm talking about, but you might, looks like maybe a Zener diode or a signal diode down in there. And there's a big blob of that glue that's covering both of them. Now, when we hooked this up, I was using a laptop as the source. And today when I hooked this up, I do got some sound. This is all the way up. And that's full volume right there. That's full volume. This thing should be blaring. I'm using basically the tape out from my bench receiver, which is a nice strong signal. This thing should be blaring music at us. You can hear it kind of cutting, crackling, breaking up a little bit. And when I plugged an input into these 4, I use this mic right here. It's an old Sony condenser mic with a 1/4-inch input. I've got no sound on any of these, no signal coming into any of these. And on the 2 that you can use a turntable with, I plugged the bench receiver into those. I should have got a really loud, distorted sound. I got nothing. So the auxiliary is the only one that there's any sound coming out of. And that's it. That's all we get off this. So I'm thinking that what I want to do first is determine, do we have some kind of a power supply issue going into the mixer part of this? Or is there an amp problem? I wouldn't think there's an amp problem, but right here is where it feeds in from that mixer into this board right here. That's the main amp in connections. So I think the first thing I probably want to do is I want to disconnect those two lines. And let's feed a signal into this thing and see what the output of the amplifier is. We could have a power supply issue. I've seen that there's some voltage lines here feeding that mixer portion of this. So it's possible that we could have a power supply issue, and it could be related to that blob of very dark glue right there that may have corroded through something. But first, let's remove these two lines right here, and let's feed our own signal into this thing and see what it'll do. So give me a second for that. I'll pick back up with you and see what we find out. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I'll show you what I found out. The first thing I did was just disconnect the signal coming from the mixer that's going into the amplifier, the input on the amplifier. I drove a signal into the amp, and it was louder, but it was still crackling. So the next thing I did was we're going to take a signal out of this, route it through the bench receiver, and see if it sounds any better. So basically, just using the tape monitor loop on the receiver, we're coming out of the bench receiver, going into the amplifier through the auxiliary, and then coming back out on the line that would be tapping into the main amp of this unit. So it's just looping back out into the bench receiver, and here's what we got.
This time, she's choosing to help protect her Pfizer's RSV vaccine, Abrysvo. Abrysvo is a vaccine.
And it is loud, there is no doubt about that, and it's clean, but I still don't have any sound on any of these inputs. On the 4 mic inputs, I have no sound there. And so I'm starting to think that we probably are dealing with some type of a power supply issue, because I can't see a transistor or something in the amplifier disabling these 4 inputs from not working. So there's some type of shared problem between the two of them. Whether we have a situation where there's caps that's causing that, the jackets are slid down on some of these, that doesn't really concern me that much, but they could be open. That's possible. I think if they were open, I'd hear maybe some hum, possibly, but if they're open in the power supply that's feeding this mixer board, and I checked voltage right here, there's only 5 volts going into this board. That seems low to me. I would think that would be at least 9, 12 volts going into that thing. And I don't hear, or I don't see anything but 5 volts there. So I think what I want to do next is let's pull this board up. Let's get a look underneath. That way we can check that resistor right here that's kind of covered in all that goo. There's also a diode down there. You can see that just barely there's like a little spot of green, so I don't know if that's corrosion. Maybe one lead of that resistor has, been eaten away, and that could be causing us to have a problem. So that's the next step. Let's go ahead and take this up, cut the whole thing off, and pull that board up and have a look underneath that. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I went ahead and got this board unscrewed. I went ahead and removed this 1000 mic at 50 volt cap off the corner right there so I could access that area with the glue. And I did do that. I even scraped it up. And you can see the lead of this Zener diode right here is not 8 all the way through, and neither is the resistor. Another thing I want to note, I checked every single cap in this area, and every single one of these caps is perfect. The only one that is suspicious is this one, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But every one of these caps is perfect, including these 1 mic at 50. These 1 mic at 50 don't check any differently than a brand new one out of my stock check. So don't let the jacket being slid down fool you. That is not an automatic indication of a bad cap. In some circumstances, yes, but not every circumstance. So I wasn't really concerned about that, like I said, even when I initially seen it. But the glue did give me cause for concern. And what we're going to do here is the first thing I wanted to check is the components in this little area right here, the 2 transistors, this resistor, this diode, and this capacitor. They're all kind of in the same circuit branch together. So let's go ahead and flip it over, and the first thing we'll do is check the resistor. And I'm kind of made it to where this is a little easier to do. Don't want to have to start unsoldering wires if I don't have to. And although the meter is out of the shot, the resistor is right here at this location. Let's see if I can zoom you in a little bit here. The diode is right next to the cap, and the resistor is right below the diode. And that is a 3.9K resistor, and it is slowly trying to make it there. I got the meter out of the shot, obviously. But what's more of a concern to me is this diode and the way that it checks. So we'll hold off on the resistor for the moment. So if we go to diode check, and of course, you know a short will give you the beat, and there is a short there, right there on that diode. But if we come down to where this capacitor is, there's also a short right there. So is it the cap or is it the diode that's shorted? So the first thing I want to do is I want to lift this lead of this capacitor. This diode, the lead of it is not eaten through. It's intact. But I don't know if there's an ID on the diode for me to know what value of Zener it is. I looked last night. I didn't see any service information online about this amplifier. I've seen several for a lower power model, but it didn't have the same amp setup in it. But I didn't see anything for this one. So let's go ahead and let's pull that lead of that cap off and see if it checks shorted. Our best scenario would be if the cap is the problem, because that would be easy enough to fix. If the diode is, I'm going to have to hope I can get some kind of ID off of it and see if I can tell what it is. And I believe I have that desoldered enough to where it's not touching anything. And it's not the cap that's the problem, it's the diode. So I got to pull it out, and we're going to have to see if we can identify what it is. So I'll tell you what, let me pause here, I'll pick back up with you, let me get it out, look at it under some magnification and see if I can figure out what it is, and I'll pick back up with you. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I was able to get that Zener diode pulled out of the circuit, and it does have some identifying marks on it. It's very difficult to see without magnification, so I took a couple of pictures with my phone so we could blow it up and get a little better look at it. That 3.9K resistor that's used right there to the left of that cap had risen in value, so I went ahead and changed it. The 2.7 at the below the cap, the 2.7K resistor there is perfectly fine. So I left it alone. And the cap right next to that resistor, C309, that is a 10-volt cap. So that is used in conjunction with this Zener diode. So we'll take a look at the pictures I took with my phone. See if I can get you in here. And if you can see what I see, it looks like a 9 and a 2 right there. And I took a second one that maybe gives it a little better. So it looks to me like it's a 9.2. The thing is that ECG doesn't list a 9.2 Zener. They only list a 9.1. And so I have one. And given the fact that that cap right there is a 10-volt cap, I think we're going to go ahead and throw this 9.1 Zener in there and see what happens. I mean, it had a shorted Zener in it to begin with, so I don't think anything's going to happen. If anything, we're only going to improve the situation. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that in there, put that cap back in on the end right there, and we're going to see if this thing will start producing sound the way it's supposed to. So give me a moment for that, and we'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I went ahead and got the 9.1 volt Zener installed, and we have normal operation again. Now this is as loud as it should be. I'll give you an example. Also got all of the other channels restored, fixing that Zener diode down here in the power supply. Obviously, restored the voltage going into the mixer. But I was way wrong on the voltage going in. Right now, on these two terminals for the B plus going into this thing, it's 45 volts, which makes sense because that's a 50 volt cap right there. So that kind of makes sense, but I wasn't thinking quite that high. I was thinking more along the lines of 9 to 12 volts, but that got that all restored. The mic operation is working. I'll turn that up. I'll turn this one down and bring the mic up. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. And we can roll it into feedback if we want here. I'm using a realistic condenser mic that actually has 2 elements in it. I bought this for tape decks and reel-to-reels back when I was doing a lot of those, just so I could test the mic input jacks both at the same time. So there's actually 2 1/4-inch plugs at the end of this. So we'll roll it into feedback a little bit. And that seems to be working just fine. Now we'll check the other 2. So yeah, these are one gray, one red. And then we'll bring up the other 2 channels. Oops. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. We'll roll that into feedback here real quick. There we go. So it's doing good. No issues whatsoever there. So the only other thing that was bothering me about this is that if you take a look at this meter, it seems really dim to me. So what I did was I took this off, and somebody has soldered in like a pilot for this type of light across the fuse lamp of this. So I'm going to change this out real quick, and once I get that changed, I'll bring you back and we're going to do a final play test on this and wrap it up. But turns out if you've got one of these and you have the issue of little to no sound, you might want to look at that 9-volt Zener diode, or 9.1 in this case. We think it may have been a 9.2. I don't know, to be honest. All I know is the cap is 10 volts and the diode we removed had a 9 on it. So we're going to say 9.1 is going to be good enough. Everything seems to be working just fine. So give me a second to change that lamp out, and we're going to get the top lid on this and we're going to wrap it up. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. We're going to take one final look at this realistic MPA-80 PA amplifier. And as for our light, you should see that looking much improved over someone soldering a 1-bulb pilot in place of this fuse lamp. That is one way to do it, I guess, just not the right way. So we put the correct one in there, so we got the meter illuminated. It didn't escape me that there was 4 potentiometers on that amp circuit board. One of them, I am quite certain, is for the idle current, one is for the clipping, and one might be for DC offset. I measured idle across the emitter resistors, and it was about 8.9. So I would imagine they're probably trying to run this at around 10 millivolts. So I think we're going to leave it alone, since there was no outstanding issues with anything like that. The amp had ran for quite a while and was extremely cool to the touch. And even the times I ramped it up in here, it was sounding, feeling pretty good. So anyway, something a little different. Most of the time here on this channel, it's home audio, video, or car audio. So definitely an interesting one to break up the monotony a little bit. So the way I've got this set up right now is I'm running this thing through my bench receiver's headphones output so we can get a little tone to the music. I'm running both bench speakers in parallel, coming to a 4-ohm load across the spring-loaded speaker terminals in the back of this thing, but without coming through the headphone jack. We don't have any tone to this, so it's just real flat. It's very loud, but it's really flat. So I would certainly suggest an equalizer in that loop running this amplifier for music anyway. I'm not so sure about public address, but definitely for music. So as we sign out on this one, we're going to listen to this. I have used this record before on my channel. This is Emerson, Lake and Powell. not Palmer. Palmer was not in this band at the time. He was in Asia. And so they made this record, I believe, in 86, 87. And in my opinion, it's one of their great albums. So we're going to listen to a little bit of Touch and Go on the way out of this one. And as always, I want to thank you guys very much. I appreciate you checking out the videos on my channel as well as this video. And we will catch you on the next one. So here we go.